The blood-red sunset cast long shadows across the dusty streets of Redemption Creek as Winifred Valerian stepped off the stagecoach, her gloved hand trembling despite her efforts to appear composed. The year was 1875, and this remote Arizona settlement represented her last hope for escape from a past that haunted her waking hours and poisoned her dreams. "First time in these parts, madam." The stagecoach driver handed down her weathered trunk, eyeing her black morning dress with thinly veiled curiosity. "Yes," she answered simply, not meeting his gaze. At 26, Winifred had already experienced more tragedy than most faced in a lifetime. Widowed just 3 months prior, she had fled east from California with nothing but her meager savings and a desperate plan to start anew where no one knew her name or her history. The main street of Redemption Creek stretched before her like an uncertain future. Saloons, a general store, and various establishments lined the dirt road. Winifred clutched her reticule tighter, feeling the weight of the small Derringer pistol inside. The weapon had been her husband's final gift to her before consumption claimed him, and though she'd never fired it, its presence provided a small comfort. "The Silverton boarding house is just up the way," the driver offered, pointing to a whitewashed 2-story building at the far end of the street. "Mrs. Cartwright runs a decent establishment. Clean beds, fair prices." "Thank you," Winifred murmured, gathering her skirts to avoid the dust. The journey had been long, and exhaustion pulled at her bones like lead weights. She hadn't taken 3 steps when gunshots erupted from the largest saloon. Instinctively, she ducked, heart hammering against her ribs. A man came crashing through the batwing doors, stumbling onto the boardwalk before falling face first into the dirt. "That'll teach you to cheat at my table, Jenkins," a voice bellowed from inside. The fallen man groaned, struggling to his feet as blood trickled from his nose. When he spotted Winifred watching, he spat to the side and glared. "What are you staring at, lady?" Before she could respond, another figure emerged from the saloon. Tall and broad-shouldered, he moved with the easy confidence of a mountain lion. His face was partially obscured by the shadow of his hat brim, but Winifred could make out a strong jaw darkened by stubble. "That's enough, Jenkins," the newcomer said, voice low and steady. "The lady doesn't need your attention. Now get yourself to Doc Miller's if that nose is broken, and don't come back until you learn to lose with dignity." Jenkins muttered something unintelligible but thought better of further confrontation. He staggered away, leaving Winifred alone with the stranger. The man turned to her, and she got her first clear view of his face. Weathered by sun and wind, it bore the marks of a hard life, but his eyes, a startling blue against his tanned skin, held an unexpected kindness. "Welcome to Redemption Creek," he said, tipping his hat. "Not the best first impression, I reckon." "It seems aptly named, at least," Winifred replied, finding her voice at last. The hint of a smile touched his lips. "Wade Calloway," he introduced himself. "Sheriff of this unruly town such as it is." "Winifred Valerian," she returned. "Recently of San Francisco." Sheriff Calloway's eyes flickered briefly to her black dress, understanding dawning in his expression. "Mrs. Valerian, then, you'll be wanting to get settled. May I escort you to your destination?" Winifred hesitated. In San Francisco, she'd learned the hard way that kindness often came with hidden costs, yet something about the sheriff's direct gaze put her at ease. "The boarding house," she said finally, "if it's not too much trouble." "No trouble at all," he whistled to a young boy loitering nearby. "Jimmy, take Mrs. Valerian's trunk to Mrs. Cartwright's. Tell her it's for the new arrival." As the boy scurried to obey, Wade offered Winifred his arm. After a moment's pause, she accepted it, feeling the solid strength beneath his sleeve. They began walking up the street, her trunk following on Jimmy's wagon. "San Francisco's a fair distance," Wade remarked. "What brings you to our little corner of nowhere?" "A teaching position," she answered, the half-truth coming easily to her lips. "I answered an advertisement in the Chronicle. The town council seeks someone to educate the local children." "Ah," Wade nodded. That would be Reverend Tilson's doing, been trying to bring some civilization to this place for years now. They passed the general store, where a group of women paused in their conversation to openly stare at Winifred. Their scrutiny made her skin crawl, but she kept her chin high. "Don't mind them," Wade said quietly. "New faces are rare enough to be an event around here, especially a lady of refinement such as yourself." "I'm hardly refined, Sheriff," Winifred said, "just trying to make my way. Out here, that's refinement enough." They reached the boarding house steps and Wade released her arm. "Mrs. Cartwright will see you settled. The school building is just past the church, can't miss it. If you need anything at all, my office is across from the general store." Winifred found herself reluctant to part ways with the sheriff, the first friendly face she'd encountered. "Thank you for your kindness, Sheriff Calloway." "Wade," he corrected gently. "And it's no kindness, madam, just common decency." As he tipped his hat again and turned to leave, Winifred called after him, surprising herself. "Is it always like this? The fighting, I mean?" Wade paused, considering her question. Redemption Creek sits at the crossroads of cattle drives, mining claims, and the old frontier. Men come here carrying their troubles and their dreams. Sometimes they collide. He studied her face for a moment. "Does that frighten you, Mrs. Valerian?" The question caught her off guard with its directness. In that moment, all the fears she'd been holding at bay threatened to overwhelm her, fear of her past catching up to her, fear of failing in this remote place, fear of the violence that seemed to permeate the very air. "Yes," she whispered, the admission slipping out before she could stop it. "I am afraid." Wade's expression softened and he took a step closer. "Fear ends beside me," he said, his voice a low promise. "While I'm sheriff of this town, you have nothing to fear, not from Jenkins, not from anyone." The conviction in his words warmed something in Winifred's chest that had been cold for months. She nodded, unable to articulate a response. "Good day, Mrs. Valerian," Wade said. "I expect we'll be seeing more of each other." As he walked away, Winifred watched his retreating form and found herself hoping he was right. The boarding house proved to be as clean and respectable as promised. Harriet Cartwright, a no-nonsense widow in her 50s, showed Winifred to a small but comfortable room on the second floor. "Bathrooms at the end of the hall," she explained, pointing. "Hot water on Saturdays for bathing. Breakfast at 6, dinner at 5. I don't serve lunch except Sundays. Kitchen's off limits between meals." "That sounds perfectly reasonable," Winifred said, surveying the narrow bed, washstand, and small writing desk that would be her home for the foreseeable future. Harriet lingered in the doorway, curiosity evident despite her brisk manner. "Teaching position," the sheriff said. "Yes." "I start next week with the new term." "Brave of you to come all this way alone," Harriet commented. "Most women wouldn't." Winifred unpinned her hat, avoiding the older woman's gaze. "I suppose necessity breeds courage, Mrs. Cartwright." HMPH. "Well, supper's in an hour." "Don't be late, I don't hold meals." With that, she left Winifred to unpack her meager belongings. Alone at last, Winifred sank onto the bed, the events of the day catching up with her. She removed the derringer from her reticule, turning it over in her hands before placing it in the drawer of the bedside table. Then she extracted a folded newspaper clipping from her handbag, the advertisement that had brought her here. "Teacher wanted," it proclaimed in bold type. "Redemption Creek, Arizona Territory seeks educated individual to instruct town children. Experience preferred but not required. Room and board provided plus modest salary." What the advertisement didn't mention was how remote the town was, or how lawless it appeared. For the 100th time, Winifred questioned her decision to come here. But then she remembered the sheriff's steady gaze, his promise of protection, and she felt her resolve strengthen. This was her chance to start anew. She would not waste it. The next morning, Winifred rose with the sun. After a hearty breakfast of biscuits, eggs, and coffee shared with the boarding house's 3 other residents, a traveling salesman, an elderly mining engineer, and a young woman who worked at the telegraph office, she set out to familiarize herself with the town. Redemption Creek looked different in the clear light of day. What had seemed threatening in the evening shadows now appeared merely weathered and work-worn. She made her way to the schoolhouse, a simple clapboard building with a small bell tower. Finding it unlocked, she stepped inside. The classroom was sparse but serviceable rows of wooden desks facing a teacher's desk on a slightly raised platform. A blackboard covered most of the front wall, and a pot-bellied stove stood in the corner. Bookshelves lined the back wall, though they held disappointingly few volumes. Winifred ran her fingers along the teacher's desk, imagining herself standing before a room of students. In San Francisco, she had assisted at a ladies' seminary for several years before her marriage, teaching music and literature. The work had brought her joy, a feeling she desperately needed to recapture. "You must be Mrs. Valerian." Winifred turned to find a tall, thin man in clerical garb standing in the doorway. His gray hair and beard framed a face lined with care but brightened by intelligent eyes. "Reverend Tilson." She guessed, extending her hand. "Indeed." He shook her hand firmly. "We're grateful you've come. The children have been without proper instruction since Miss Holloway departed in the spring." "May I ask why she left?" Winifred inquired. "Marriage," the Reverend answered with a slight smile. "To a rancher from the Northern Territory. A common fate for female teachers out here, I'm afraid." "I assure you, Reverend, I have no interest in remarriage," Winifred stated firmly. "My focus is entirely on my work." Something in her tone must have conveyed more than she intended, for the Reverend's expression softened with sympathy. "Of course. I've taken the liberty of compiling a list of students you can expect next week, 23 in total, ranging from 6 to 16 years of age. Quite a range to manage alone." "I've dealt with mixed classrooms before," Winifred assured him. "We'll establish a system where older students assist the younger ones." They discussed curriculum and supplies, with Reverend Tilson promising to order additional books from Tucson. As they concluded their meeting, he hesitated before speaking again. "Mrs. Valerian, I should warn you that Redemption Creek can be challenging for newcomers, especially those accustomed to city refinements." "Sheriff Calloway mentioned something similar," she replied. "Wade's a good man," the Reverend said thoughtfully. "Best sheriff this town has had. Before him, well," he shook his head. "Let's just say we're fortunate to have him." "He seems very capable," Winifred agreed, trying to ignore the sudden warmth in her cheeks. "Indeed. Though I fear he carries too much on his shoulders alone." The Reverend walked to the door. "The town council meets tomorrow evening at 7 in the church hall. We'd like you to attend, meet the other community leaders." "I'll be there," Winifred promised. After the Reverend departed, she spent another hour examining the classroom, making notes on improvements she wished to implement. As she finally stepped outside, locking the door behind her, she nearly collided with a man rushing past. "Pardon me, madam," he exclaimed, steadying her with a hand on her elbow. He was young, perhaps 20, with a shock of red hair beneath his hat. "Didn't see you there." "No harm done," Winifred assured him, noticing his frantic expression. "Is something wrong?" "Heading for the sheriff," he explained breathlessly. "Trouble at the Silverado mine, collapse trapping workers." Winifred's heart seized. "Is anyone hurt?" "Don't know yet. I just ride for the company." He tipped his hat hastily. "Sorry again, madam." As he hurried away, Winifred found herself following, drawn by an impulse she couldn't name. She reached the sheriff's office just as Wade emerged, buckling a gun belt around his waist. "How many trapped?" he was asking the messenger. "At least 5 men, Sheriff. Maybe more. Foreman says they need help moving timber to shore up the entrance before they can get inside." "Round up any able-bodied men from the saloons," Wade instructed. "I'll bring Doc Miller." He noticed Winifred standing nearby and paused. "Mrs. Valerian, you should return to the boarding house. This isn't a place for 'I want to help,'" she interrupted. "I have some medical knowledge." "My father was a physician in Boston." Wade's eyes searched hers, measuring her resolve. Finally, he nodded. "Very well, but stay clear of the mine entrance until we've secured it." Within 30 minutes, A group had assembled at the edge of town. Wade, the doctor, several miners from other operations, and a handful of townsmen. Winifred rode with Doc Miller in his buggy, following the mounted men down a dusty trail that led into the foothills. The Silverado mine was a gash in the hillside, its entrance now partially blocked by fallen timber and rock. Men worked frantically to clear debris while others carried lumber to reinforce what remained of the tunnel supports. The air was thick with dust and fear. Winifred helped Doc Miller set up a treatment area, laying out bandages and medicines from his bag. Soon the first injured miner was brought out, a young man with a deep gash on his forehead and a possibly broken arm. As she cleaned his wound, Winifred spotted Wade at the mine entrance, his shirt already soaked with sweat as he helped move a massive beam. The muscles in his arms and back strained beneath the fabric, and she found herself momentarily transfixed by his raw strength and determination. For hours they worked, retrieving miners one by one from the collapsed section. Most suffered only minor injuries, but the last man brought out was unconscious, his breathing labored from the dust he'd inhaled. "Pneumonia will be the real danger," Doc Miller muttered as they loaded the man into a wagon. "If he survives the night, he might have a chance." By sunset, the crisis had passed. 4 miners had been treated for cuts and broken bones, while the unconscious man had been taken to Doc Miller's infirmary. 1 miner remained unaccounted for, presumed dead beneath tons of rock that couldn't be safely moved. Exhausted and filthy, Winifred sat on a boulder watching the activity wind down. Wade approached, offering a canteen of water. His face was streaked with dirt, highlighting the intensity of his eyes. "You did well today," he said as she drank gratefully. "Doc says you have steady hands." "My father insisted I learn basic medical procedures," she explained, returning the canteen. "He believed women were naturally suited to healing. Your father sounds like a wise man." Wade settled beside her on the boulder, their shoulders nearly touching. "May I ask what happened to him?" "He died during a cholera outbreak when I was 17, Winifred answered, the old grief muted by time. "He contracted it from a patient." Wade was silent for a moment. "And your husband?" Winifred stiffened. "Consumption, 3 months ago." "I'm sorry for your loss," he said quietly, though it seems inadequate to say. "Thank you," she murmured, then, feeling a sudden need to change the subject, asked, "Have you been sheriff long?" 2 years, Wade replied. "Before that, I rode with the Arizona Rangers." "What made you settle here?" A shadow passed over his face. "I was tracking a gang that had robbed the Tucson mail coach. The trail led here. By the time it was over, the previous sheriff was dead, and the town council asked me to take his place." There was more to the story. Winifred could sense it in the tension that suddenly lined his body, but she didn't press. Everyone had secrets, herself included. "We should get back to town," Wade said, standing and offering his hand. "You'll be missed at the boarding house." Winifred placed her hand in his, allowing him to help her to her feet. The contact sent an unexpected warmth up her arm. "Thank you for allowing me to help today. You proved yourself capable," he said simply. "That carries weight out here." They returned to town as the first stars appeared, the shared experience creating a tentative bond between them. When they reached the boarding house, Wade hesitated before bidding her goodnight. "The town council meeting tomorrow," he said. "I'll escort you if you'd like." "That would be kind," Winifred agreed, surprised at how pleased the offer made her feel. 7 o'clock then." He tipped his hat and turned to leave. "Sheriff," Winifred called softly. He looked back, one eyebrow raised in question. "What you said yesterday about fear ending beside you. Have you always been so fearless?" Wade's expression grew distant. "No, Mrs. Valerian, I've known fear intimately. The difference is learning to act despite it." With those words lingering in the air between them, he walked away into the gathering darkness. The town council meeting proved to be more revealing than Winifred had anticipated. Seated in the church hall beside Wade, she was introduced to Redemption Creek's leading citizens. Cyrus Hamilton, owner of the general store, Edward Pennington, the banker. Victor Hayes, who owned the largest saloon, and Martha Winters, a stern-faced woman who ran the dress shop. Reverend Tilson presided over the meeting with quiet authority, guiding discussions about road repairs, water access during the dry season, and concerns about increased bandit activity in the region. "They hit the Butterfield stage last week," Wade reported. "Took the strongbox and 2 passengers' valuables, same description as the Tucson robbery last month." "Jasper Reeves," Cyrus Hamilton muttered. "Has to be his gang, they've been getting bolder." "We can't confirm it was Reeves," Wade cautioned. "I've sent word to Prescott for any information they might have. Meanwhile, our town remains vulnerable," Victor Hayes complained. "One sheriff can't patrol the whole area." "Perhaps we should consider hiring deputies," Edward Pennington suggested. Wade shook his head. "The town budget can barely cover my salary, Pennington, unless you're volunteering to fund additional lawmen." The banker's face soured. "The bank has shareholders to consider." "Then we make do with what we have," the Reverend intervened smoothly. "Now, on a more pleasant note, I'd like to formally introduce Mrs. Winifred Valerian, our new schoolteacher." All eyes turned to Winifred, who rose and nodded politely. "I'm grateful for the opportunity to serve this community," she said. "I look forward to meeting your children next week when classes begin." "We're fortunate to have someone of your qualifications, Mrs. Valerian," Martha Winters said, "though I wonder what brings a city-educated widow all the way to our humble town." The question, innocent on its surface, carried an undercurrent of suspicion that made Winifred tense. Before she could formulate a response, Wade spoke up. "Mrs. Valerian answered our advertisement, Mrs. Winters. Her reasons for seeking a new start are her own business, I believe." The subtle rebuke silenced Martha, though her narrowed eyes suggested she wasn't entirely satisfied. After the meeting concluded, Wade walked Winifred back to the boarding house. The night was cool, stars brilliantly clear in the vast Arizona sky. "Thank you for your intervention with Mrs. Winters," Winifred said quietly. "Martha's suspicious by nature," Wade replied. "Don't take it personally. She's right to be curious. It is unusual for someone like me to come to a place like this." Winifred hesitated, then added, "I should tell you that I haven't been entirely forthcoming about my circumstances." Wade stopped walking, turning to face her. In the moonlight, his expression was serious but not judgmental. "Are you in some kind of trouble, Mrs. Valerian?" "Not with the law," she assured him quickly. "But I did leave San Francisco rather hastily." After a moment's deliberation, Wade gestured to a bench outside the general store. "Perhaps we should sit for this conversation." Once seated, Winifred gathered her courage. "My husband, Thomas, was a business partner in a shipping company. After his death, I discovered he had borrowed heavily from his partner, Jeffrey Blackwell. When I couldn't repay the debt, Blackwell suggested an alternative arrangement. Marriage," Wade guessed, his jaw tightening. "Yes." "He gave me 1 month to consider his proposal, as if grief could be scheduled for convenience." Bitterness crept into her voice. "Blackwell is not a man accustomed to rejection. When I refused him, he became insistent. I feared what might happen if I remained." Wade's eyes had darkened with anger. "Did he threaten you?" "Not explicitly, but his servants began watching my home. My mail was intercepted. Small things disappeared from my garden." Winifred shuddered at the memory. "I used what little money I had to purchase a train ticket east, then saw your advertisement in a newspaper left in the station. It seemed like Providence, a place so remote that Blackwell would never think to look. You believe he would pursue you?" "I believe he considers me his property now that Thomas is gone. My husband owed him, so now I do." Winifred looked down at her hands, clasped tightly in her lap. "I should have told you before accepting the position." "If you feel I've been dishonest, you did what was necessary to protect yourself," Wade interrupted. "There's no shame in that." His understanding brought unexpected tears to her eyes, which she blinked away quickly. "I don't wish to bring trouble to Redemption Creek." "Mrs. Valerian Winifred," Wade said gently. This town has seen its share of trouble long before you arrived. If this Blackwell somehow tracks you here, he'll find that women aren't property in Redemption Creek." The use of her given name sent a flutter through her chest. "Thank you," she whispered. They sat in companionable silence for a moment, the night sounds of the desert surrounding them. Finally, Wade spoke again. "Would you tell me about him? Your husband?" The question surprised her, but Winifred found herself wanting to share. Thomas was kind, intelligent. A scholar at heart, though business was his profession. We met at a literary society gathering he was discussing Emerson's essays. A soft smile touched her lips at the memory. He loved poetry, music. He wasn't a robust man, but his mind was extraordinary. Wade listened attentively, his expression thoughtful. "You loved him deeply." "I did. Our marriage was brief, just over 2 years, but it was happy." Winifred hesitated. "And you, Sheriff, have you ever been married?" A shadow crossed his face. "No," he answered simply, offering nothing more. Sensing his reluctance, Winifred didn't press. Instead, she asked, "What brought you to law enforcement? It seems an unusual choice for a man who reads Emerson." Wade's eyebrows rose in surprise. "You noticed the book on my desk yesterday." "I did. Self-Reliance is one of my favorites." "Mine as well." A half-smile tugged at his mouth. "My father was a Texas Ranger. I suppose I followed his path naturally enough, though I spent some years wandering first. Worked cattle drives, did some prospecting, even dealt cards for a time." "A varied education," Winifred observed. "It taught me something about human nature, at least." Wade stood, offering his hand to help her up. "It's getting late. I should see you back." They walked the remaining distance to the boarding house in comfortable silence. At the steps, Winifred turned to face him. "Thank you for listening, Wade. It's been a long time since I've spoken so openly with anyone." "The burden of secrets gets heavy after a while," he replied, his eyes holding hers. "Good night, Winifred. Good night, Sheriff." As she watched him walk away, Winifred realized with a start that for the first time since Thomas's death, she had gone an entire evening without feeling the crushing weight of grief and fear. In its place was something gentler, a tentative warmth, like the first rays of dawn after a long, cold night. The following week passed in a flurry of activity as Winifred prepared for the start of classes. She organized textbooks, created lesson plans, and visited many of her future students' families. The townspeople, initially reserved, gradually warmed to her earnest enthusiasm for education. She saw Wade frequently during this time, sometimes officially, as when he spoke to her class about safety and law, and sometimes by chance, passing on the street or sharing a table at the small cafe near the general store. Each encounter deepened her appreciation for his steady character and quiet intelligence. On Sunday, Winifred attended services at Reverend Tilson's church. Sitting in the simple wooden pew, she was surprised when Wade slipped in beside her just as the first hymn began. He was freshly shaved, his usually rumpled hair neatly combed, and he wore a clean black coat that emphasized the breadth of his shoulders. "I didn't expect to see you here," she whispered as the congregation sang. "I come most Sundays," he replied quietly, "though usually I sit in the back." Throughout the service, Winifred was acutely aware of his presence beside her, the faint scent of shaving soap, the way his deep voice joined the hymns, the occasional brush of his sleeve against hers. When their fingers accidentally touched while sharing a hymnal, neither moved away. After the service, several families invited Winifred to Sunday dinner, but before she could accept any invitation, Wade stepped forward. "If you're not otherwise engaged, Mrs. Valerian, I thought you might like to see a bit more of the countryside. It's a fine day for riding." The invitation, unexpected but welcome, brought a smile to her face. "I'd like that very much, Sheriff." They collected horses from the livery stable, a gentle mare for Winifred and Wade's own sturdy gelding, and rode north out of town. Winifred, wearing her one non-morning dress of navy blue, felt a freedom she hadn't experienced in months as they followed a winding trail into the hills. "Where are we going?" she asked as Wade led them through a narrow pass between rocky outcroppings. Somewhere special, he answered cryptically. Not much farther now. The trail opened suddenly onto a hidden valley, lush with greenery surrounding a small, clear pool fed by a spring that trickled down the rocks. Cottonwood trees provided dappled shade, and wildflowers dotted the grass with splashes of color. It's beautiful, Winifred breathed as they dismounted. I never imagined such a place existed out here. The desert keeps its treasures hidden, Wade said, securing the horses in the shade before extracting a bundle from his saddlebag. I thought we might have a picnic if you're agreeable. Very agreeable, she assured him, helping to spread a blanket beneath the largest cottonwood. The simple meal of bread, cheese, dried fruit, and cold chicken tasted like a feast in such surroundings. They talked easily, sharing stories of their childhood's Wades on a small ranch outside San Antonio, Winifred's in Boston's academic circles. How did you discover this place? Winifred asked as they finished eating. By accident, Wade admitted. I was tracking a mountain lion that had been taking calves from the Peterson Ranch, found myself lost in a dust storm and stumbled upon this valley. He gazed around appreciatively. Saved my life, truth be told. I've never shown it to anyone else. The admission touched her deeply. Thank you for sharing it with me. Wade's eyes held hers for a long moment. You're easy to share things with, Winifred. Her heart quickened at his words and the warmth in his gaze. Before she could respond, he stood and offered his hand. There's something else I'd like to show you. He led her to a narrow path that wound behind the spring, climbing gently through the rocks until they reached a small plateau. The view from this vantage point was breathtaking, rolling hills giving way to vast desert plains, with distant mountains rising purple on the horizon. This is what I love about this territory, Wade said, standing close beside her. The endlessness of it, the possibility. It's magnificent, Winifred agreed. So different from the city where everything feels confined and prescribed. Is that how your life felt in San Francisco? Confined, Winifred considered the question thoughtfully. Not when Thomas was alive. We created our own world, filled with books and ideas and music. Her expression clouded. After he died, all the walls seemed to close in, expectations of how a widow should behave, who she should turn to for protection. And now, Wade asked softly. Now I feel as though I can breathe again, she admitted. Despite everything, the remoteness, the dangers, I feel more alive here than I have in months. Wade turned to face her fully, his eyes searching hers. I'm glad you came to Redemption Creek, Winifred. So am I, she whispered. For a breathless moment, she thought he might kiss her. Instead, he gently tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, his fingers lingering against her cheek in a touch so tender it made her heart ache. We should head back, he said reluctantly. Storm clouds gathering to the west. The ride back to town was quieter, both lost in thoughts of what had passed between them and what remained unspoken. As they approached Redemption Creek, Wade suddenly reined in his horse, his posture alert. What is it? Winifred asked, noticing his hand moving to rest on his revolver. Not sure, he murmured, eyes scanning the town ahead. Something doesn't feel right. As they drew closer, the reason for his unease became apparent. A fancy carriage stood outside the hotel, an expensive conveyance completely out of place in the dusty frontier town. Beside it, two men in city attire conferred with the hotel owner. Winifred felt the blood drain from her face as recognition dawned. Jeffrey, she whispered, her hands tightening on the reins until her knuckles whitened. Wade's head snapped toward her. Blackwell. She nodded, unable to speak past the sudden constriction in her throat. How did he find you? Wade asked, his voice low and tight with concern. I don't know, she managed. Perhaps he hired someone to track me. He has the resources. Wade's expression hardened. Stay here, he instructed, dismounting and handing her the reins to his horse. I'll find out what he wants. No, Winifred grabbed his arm. Please, I can't let you confront him. You don't know what he's capable of. I'm the sheriff, Winifred. It's my job to deal with trouble. This is my trouble, she insisted. I brought this on Redemption Creek. I should face it. Wade's eyes softened as he looked at her. "You're not alone anymore," he said gently. "Remember what I told you about fear. Fear ends beside you," she repeated softly. "Trust me," he urged. "Let me handle this." After a moment's hesitation, Winifred nodded. "Be careful. Blackwell doesn't respect any law but his own desires." Wade squeezed her hand reassuringly before striding toward the hotel. Winifred remained just out of sight, her heart pounding with dread as she watched him approach the group. "Gentlemen," she heard him call. "Welcome to Redemption Creek. I'm Sheriff Calloway." The taller of the two strangers turned, revealing a handsome face marred by cold eyes and a mouth that seemed permanently set in a disdainful curve. Jeffrey Blackwell was exactly as Winifred remembered, impeccably dressed, outwardly charming, and utterly without conscience. "Sheriff," Blackwell acknowledged smoothly. "How fortunate. Perhaps you can assist us. We're looking for a woman who may have passed through here, a widow named Valerian." "May I ask why you're seeking this woman?" Wade's tone was professional, giving nothing away. "Mrs. Valerian is the widow of my former business partner," Blackwell explained. "She left San Francisco quite suddenly, leaving certain financial matters unresolved. I've been attempting to locate her to settle these affairs." "That's so." Wade's posture remained relaxed, but Winifred could see the tension in his shoulders. "What kind of financial matters?" "I'm afraid that's a private business concern, Sheriff." Blackwell's smile didn't reach his eyes. "I assure you, my intentions are entirely honorable. I simply wish to ensure Thomas's widow is provided for, as he would have wanted." Wade considered this for a moment. "Well, Mr. Blackwell, I make it my business to know who comes and goes in my town. I recall a Mrs. Valerian passing through about 2 weeks back. Mentioned heading for Denver if memory serves." Blackwell's eyes narrowed slightly. "Are you certain? Our information suggested she might have stayed." "Quite certain," Wade confirmed. "Redemption Creek's just a stopover for most travelers, not much to keep a city lady like you described." The other man with Blackwell, a hard-faced individual whose bulging jacket suggested a concealed weapon, leaned in to whisper something in his employer's ear. Blackwell listened, then nodded slightly. "I see. Well, thank you for your assistance, Sheriff. Perhaps we'll continue on to Denver then." "Safe travels," Wade said pleasantly. "Road can be dangerous this time of year, bandits operating in the area. We're well prepared for any unpleasantness," Blackwell replied, his hand briefly indicating his companion. "Good day, Sheriff." Wade remained where he stood, watching as the men returned to the hotel. Once they disappeared inside, he casually walked back to where Winifred waited, his expression grim. "He doesn't believe me," Wade said quietly as he took the reins of his horse. "That man with him is no business associate, he's a hired gun. I've seen his type before." "What should we do?" Winifred asked, fear clawing at her chest. "First, we get you somewhere safe. They'll start asking questions around town, and it won't take long for someone to mention the new schoolteacher." Wade helped her dismount. "We'll leave the horses at the livery and go to my office through the back alleys." They moved quickly, avoiding the main street. Wade's office was a simple 2-room structure, the front room with a desk and cells, and a small living space in the back. He locked the door behind them, then checked his weapons. "I've bought us some time, but not much," he said as he loaded a shotgun. "Blackwell struck me as a man used to getting what he wants." "He is," Winifred confirmed, pacing anxiously. "I never imagined he would follow me this far. I'm so sorry, Wade. I've brought danger to your town." Wade set down the shotgun and crossed to her, placing his hands gently on her shoulders. "Look at me, Winifred." She raised her eyes to his, finding strength in his steady gaze. "You have nothing to apologize for," he said firmly. "Blackwell is the problem, not you, and we're going to deal with him together." "How? He won't just leave, not now that he's so close." "No, he won't," Wade agreed. "Which is why we need to confront him directly, on our terms, not his." Winifred's eyes widened in alarm. "That's too dangerous. His man is armed, and Jeffrey himself always carries a derringer." "So do I," Wade replied with a slight smile, patting his vest pocket. And more importantly, I have the law on my side. Blackwell has no legal claim on you, Winifred, no matter what your husband owed him. He won't care about legalities out here, she argued. Maybe not, but he'll care about this. Wade drew his revolver, checking the cylinder before returning it to his holster. And he'll care about the fact that every man in this town will back their sheriff if trouble starts. Before Winifred could respond, a knock came at the office door. Wade motioned for her to stay back as he moved to answer it, his hand resting on his gun. It was Jimmy, the young boy who had carried Winifred's trunk her first day in town. "Sheriff," he said breathlessly, "that fancy city feller is asking all over about the new teacher lady. Offering money for information." "Thanks, Jimmy," Wade said, pressing a coin into the boy's hand. "You didn't tell him anything, did you?" "No, sir. I said I didn't know nothing about no teacher." Jimmy's face scrunched with concern. "Is Miss Winifred in trouble?" "Nothing I can't handle," Wade assured him. "Now go on home, and if you see that man again, steer clear." After Jimmy departed, Wade turned to Winifred with renewed determination. "We're running out of time. If we wait, Blackwell will find someone willing to talk. We need to face him now together." "I'm afraid," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. Wade crossed to her, taking her hands in his. "I know, but remember what I told you that first day?" His voice dropped lower, intimate in the small space between them. "Fear ends beside me, Winifred. I won't let him hurt you, I promise." The conviction in his voice gave her courage. She squeezed his hands, drawing strength from his touch. "What's your plan?" "We go to the hotel, confront him publicly. He wants to avoid scandal, men like Blackwell always do. If we force the issue in front of witnesses, he'll have no choice but to back down. And if he doesn't," Wade's eyes hardened, "then he'll discover that San Francisco business tactics don't work in Redemption Creek." They walked to the hotel side by side, Winifred's heart pounding but her resolve firm. The lobby fell silent as they entered, all eyes turning to them. Jeffrey Blackwell stood by the registration desk, his companion lounging nearby with the false casualness of a predator ready to strike. "Mrs. Valerian," Blackwell said smoothly, his surprise quickly masked by a practiced smile. "What a pleasant surprise. Our good sheriff seemed to think you had continued on to Denver." "Mr. Blackwell," Winifred acknowledged, her voice steadier than she felt. "I think we both know why you're here. Indeed, to settle Thomas's outstanding debts, of course." He stepped closer, lowering his voice. "Though I'm disappointed you felt the need to flee rather than discuss the matter like civilized people." "There was nothing civilized about your proposal," Winifred replied, feeling Wade tense beside her. Blackwell's eyes flicked to the sheriff, then back to Winifred. "Perhaps we should continue this discussion privately. Business matters can be so tedious for outsiders." "Mrs. Valerian has nothing to discuss with you," Wade interjected, his hand resting casually near his holster. "Any legitimate debts can be handled through the courts in San Francisco." Blackwell's expression hardened. "This doesn't concern you, Sheriff. This is a private matter between myself and my late partner's widow." "That's where you're wrong," Wade replied evenly. "Mrs. Valerian is a resident of my town now. Her welfare is very much my concern." "Is that so?" Blackwell's gaze moved between them, understanding dawning in his eyes. "I see. How touching." His voice took on a mocking edge. "The gallant sheriff protecting the vulnerable widow. Tell me, Sheriff, does she know about your past? The men you've killed?" Wade's expression didn't change, but Winifred felt him go still beside her. "Every lawman has enemies, Mr. Blackwell," he said calmly. "Men who spread lies to undermine authority." "Not lies, Sheriff, facts." Blackwell smiled coldly. "My associate here did some inquiring before we arrived. The Arizona Rangers have quite the file on Wade Calloway. 5 men dead by your hand, wasn't it? Not all of them in the line of duty, from what I understand." Winifred glanced at Wade, but his face revealed nothing. "Whatever you've heard about Sheriff Calloway's past doesn't change the facts of the present," she said firmly. "I owe you nothing, Jeffrey. Thomas may have borrowed from you, but any debt died with him." "That's not how business works, my dear," Blackwell countered. Thomas leveraged his half of our company. With his death, ownership of those shares reverts to me along with all his personal assets, including his home, your home." "That can't be legal," Winifred protested. "It's all perfectly legal. The papers were drawn up by the finest attorneys in San Francisco." Blackwell reached into his coat and withdrew a folded document. "See for yourself. Thomas signed everything over as collateral." "Without my generosity, you'd be destitute." Wade took the document, scanning it quickly before handing it to Winifred. "This appears to be a legitimate loan agreement," he admitted reluctantly, "but it says nothing about personal assets or the Valerian residence." "That's covered in the partnership agreement," Blackwell replied smoothly. "Thomas's share of the business included all assets acquired during our association, including the house purchased with company funds." Winifred felt the ground shifting beneath her. "Could Thomas have truly left her so vulnerable? Even if what you say is true, I have nothing left to give you," she said. "I sold what furniture was mine to afford the journey here." "You still have one asset of considerable value," Blackwell said, his eyes cold as they raked over her. "Your hand in marriage would settle all debts instantly. As Thomas's widow, it would be a most appropriate arrangement." Wade stepped forward, placing himself between Blackwell and Winifred. "That's enough," he said, his voice dangerously quiet. "Mrs. Valerian has made her feelings on that proposal clear. I suggest you accept her decision and leave Redemption Creek." Blackwell's companion straightened, his hand moving toward his jacket. The tension in the lobby thickened as Wade's posture shifted subtly, ready for trouble. "There's no need for unpleasantness," Blackwell said, though his eyes remained hard. "I'm simply trying to resolve a business matter." "It's resolved," Wade stated flatly. "Whatever legal claims you might have can be pursued through proper channels, but you'll do it from a distance. Mrs. Valerian stays here under my protection." Something in Wade's tone, perhaps the absolute certainty in it, gave Blackwell pause. He studied the sheriff's face for a long moment, then glanced at the watching townspeople, many of whom had moved closer in silent support. "Very well," he finally said, adjusting his cuffs with exaggerated care. "If that's how you wish to proceed." He turned to Winifred. "This isn't over, my dear. The law is on my side regardless of your protector's feelings." "The law protects the innocent, Mr. Blackwell," Wade replied. "Remember that when you're considering your next move." Blackwell's jaw tightened, but he gave a curt nod. "We'll depart in the morning, Sheriff. I trust our safety is guaranteed until then." "As long as you cause no trouble, you're welcome to the hospitality of our town," Wade answered diplomatically. After Blackwell and his companion had retreated upstairs, the tension in the lobby gradually dissipated. Wade placed a gentle hand on Winifred's back, guiding her outside into the fading afternoon light. "Are you all right?" he asked once they were alone on the boardwalk. "I think so," she replied, though her hands still trembled slightly. "Thank you for standing with me." "Always," Wade said simply, and in that single word Winifred heard a promise that steadied her more than any lengthy reassurance could have done. "Did he tell the truth? About your past?" Wade's expression grew distant. "Some of it. I have killed men in the line of duty. One." He hesitated. "One was more personal, the man who murdered my sister during a stage robbery." Winifred's heart ached at the pain evident in his voice. "I'm sorry," she said softly. "It was a long time ago." He offered her his arm. "Come, you should rest. Tomorrow will bring its own challenges." As they walked toward the boarding house, Winifred found herself leaning into Wade's solid presence, drawing strength from his unwavering support. Despite the uncertainty that still loomed, she felt safer than she had in months. That night, she slept fitfully, dreams filled with Jeffrey Blackwell's cold eyes and Thomas's betrayal. She woke at dawn feeling exhausted but determined. Whatever came next, she would face it with courage, the courage Wade had helped her rediscover. She dressed carefully in her navy blue dress, pinning her hair in a simple but elegant style. As she descended the stairs for breakfast, Mrs. Cartwright met her with worried eyes. "Sheriff's waiting for you in the parlor," the landlady said. "Says it's urgent." Winifred found Wade pacing the small room, his expression grim. "What's happened?" she asked immediately. "Blackwell's gone," Wade replied. "Left sometime in the night with his man, didn't check out, just vanished." "That doesn't sound like Jeffrey," Winifred said, frowning. "He wouldn't give up so easily." "I know, that's what worries me." Wade ran a hand through his hair in frustration. "I've got men watching the roads, but he had hours of darkness to slip away. What do you think he's planning?" "I don't know, but I don't want to wait to find out." Wade took her hands in his. "Winifred, I think you should leave Redemption Creek, at least until we're certain Blackwell isn't coming back with reinforcements." Her heart sank at his words. "Leave? But the school, the children, Reverend Tilson can manage the school temporarily," Wade insisted. "Your safety is more important. Where would I go? Jeffrey found me once. He could find me again." Wade hesitated before continuing. "I have a friend, a former ranger who owns a ranch near the New Mexico border. You'd be safe there until this is resolved." "And you?" Winifred asked quietly. "Would you come with me?" The question hung between them, heavy with implications neither had voiced. "I can't leave my post," Wade answered regretfully. "Not with Blackwell still out there and the town vulnerable." Disappointment washed through her, though she understood his duty. "Then I won't go either," she decided. "I won't run anymore, Wade. This is my home now. I want to stay and fight for it with you." Wade's expression softened, and he raised one hand to cup her cheek. "You're the bravest woman I've ever known, Winifred Valerian." "Not brave," she corrected gently. "Just tired of being afraid." Their moment was interrupted by the sound of galloping hooves outside, followed by shouting. Wade tensed, moving instantly to the window. "Fire!" someone yelled in the street. "The schoolhouse is burning." Without hesitation, they rushed outside to find black smoke billowing from the direction of the school. People were already running with buckets, forming a line from the town well. Wade and Winifred joined the crowd racing toward the blaze. The schoolhouse was fully engulfed, flames licking hungrily at the wooden structure. Despite the townspeople's efforts, it was clear the building couldn't be saved. "This was deliberate," Wade said grimly, surveying the scene. "The school wasn't in use. There was no reason for a fire to start naturally." "Blackwell," Winifred whispered, the realization hitting her like a physical blow. "This is his message to me," Wade nodded, his expression hardening. "And to me. A warning of what else he might target if we don't comply with his demands." As they watched helplessly, the roof of the schoolhouse collapsed in a shower of sparks and burning timber. With it fell Winifred's hopes for her new life in Redemption Creek. Or so she thought, until she felt Wade's hand close firmly around hers. "This changes nothing," he said, his voice steady and determined. "We'll rebuild, better than before." Something in his tone, the "we" rather than "you," made Winifred look up at him. His eyes, reflecting the orange glow of the flames, held not defeat but resolve. "Together?" she asked softly. "Together," Wade confirmed, his fingers tightening around hers. "Blackwell doesn't understand what he's up against. This town, these people," he gestured to the men and women working frantically to keep the fire from spreading. "They don't break easily. Neither do you. Neither do I." As the last walls of the schoolhouse crumbled, Winifred felt something new rising from the ashes of her fear, a fierce determination to stand her ground, to build something lasting in this harsh but beautiful place. With Wade beside her, she finally believed it possible. The fire had barely cooled when rebuilding began. The people of Redemption Creek rallied around their teacher and sheriff with a solidarity that took Winifred by surprise. Men who'd barely acknowledged her before now offered lumber from their own properties. Women brought food for the workers and gathered books to replace those lost in the flames. For 2 weeks, they worked without pause. The new schoolhouse rose quickly, larger, sturdier, with proper windows and a bell tower that could be seen from anywhere in town. Winifred threw herself into the effort, working alongside everyone else, her sleeves rolled up and her hands blistered from handling rough wood. Wade stayed close, dividing his time between his sheriff's duties and overseeing the construction. Each day brought them closer, their shared purpose forging a bond that grew steadily stronger. They took their meals together, often joined by Reverend Tilson or other townspeople, but the moments they cherished most were the quiet ones at day's end, sitting on the partially built schoolhouse steps, watching the desert stars emerge. "No sign of Blackwell," Wade reported one evening, 2 weeks after the fire. "My contacts in Tucson say he boarded a train back to California 4 days ago." "Do you think it's over?" Winifred asked, not quite daring to hope. Wade considered the question carefully. "Not entirely. Men like Blackwell don't surrender easily, but he's a businessman at heart. He calculates risks and rewards. The longer he stays away from his affairs in San Francisco, the more it costs him. And the reward of forcing me to marry him diminishes every day you build a life here," Wade replied. "Every day you prove you don't need his protection or his money." Winifred nodded slowly. "I never thought I would be grateful for a fire, but in a strange way I am. It showed me I'm not alone anymore." "You never will be again," Wade said quietly. "Not if I have any say in the matter." Their eyes met in the fading light, and Winifred felt her heart quicken at the earnestness in his gaze. Slowly, giving her every chance to pull away, Wade leaned closer. When his lips finally met hers, Winifred felt as though something long broken inside her had finally begun to heal. The kiss was gentle at first, tentative, but deepened as she responded with an eagerness that surprised them both. When they finally parted, both slightly breathless, Wade rested his forehead against hers. "I've wanted to do that since the day you arrived in Redemption Creek," he admitted. "Even when I was covered in dust from the stagecoach," Winifred teased, her heart too full for serious words. "Especially then," he assured her, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "You looked so determined, so ready to face whatever came next. I admired that from the first moment." Winifred caught his hand, pressing it against her cheek. "I was terrified then, but you promised fear would end beside you. You've kept that promise every day since." Wade's expression grew serious. "I want to make you another promise, Winifred, one that lasts a lifetime." Her breath caught as she realized what he was saying. "Wade, I know it's soon," he continued quickly. "I know you're still healing from losing Thomas. I'm not asking for an immediate answer, just consider the possibility of us, a future together." Tears pricked at her eyes, but they were tears of joy, not sorrow. "I don't need time to consider it," she whispered. "My answer is yes. It has been since that day at the Hidden Valley." Wade's face lit with a smile so radiant it rivaled the setting sun. He gathered her into his arms, holding her as though she were the most precious thing in the world. "I love you, Winifred Valerian," he murmured against her hair, "with everything I am." "And I love you, Wade Calloway," she replied, her voice steady and sure, "with everything I will become." 6 months later, on a perfect spring day, Winifred stood before the newly completed schoolhouse, watching as her students filed in for the morning lessons. The building gleamed in the sunlight, its windows sparkling, the bell in the tower polished to a high shine. From her finger, a simple gold band caught the light a match to the one Wade now wore. They had married 3 months after the fire, in a ceremony attended by the entire town. The Calloways now occupied a small house near the sheriff's office, built by the same hands that had raised the new school. As the last child disappeared inside, Winifred felt a familiar presence behind her. Strong arms encircled her waist, and Wade's voice rumbled near her ear. "Keeping an eye on my wife," he explained when she turned in his embrace, "making sure she's not overworking herself." Winifred smiled up at him, knowing he worried about her condition. The child they had created together was just beginning to make its presence known, a subtle rounding of her formerly slender figure. "We're perfectly fine," she assured him, placing his hand over the gentle swell of her abdomen. "Both of us." Wade's eyes softened with wonder as they did each time he contemplated their growing family. "I still can't believe it sometimes," he admitted, "that after everything we found each other here in Redemption Creek of all places." "Perhaps that's why they named it Redemption," Winifred suggested, "for people like us who needed a second chance." Wade kissed her gently, then reluctantly released her. "I have to make my rounds, dinner at 6. I'll be waiting," she promised. As he walked away, Winifred called after him. "Sheriff Calloway," he turned, eyebrows raised in question. "I'm not afraid anymore," she said simply. Wade's smile was like the sunrise after the darkest night. "Neither am I, Mrs. Calloway, neither am I." With that, he continued on his way, and Winifred entered the schoolhouse to begin the day's lessons. Outside, Redemption Creek bustled with activity, its future stretching before it like the vast Arizona horizon full of challenges, certainly, but also filled with boundless possibility and hope. For the widow who had once whispered she was afraid, fear had indeed ended. In its place bloomed a love as enduring as the desert itself, a love born of courage, forged in adversity, and destined to last a lifetime.